And good afternoon. How's everybody, or good morning? How's everybody doing? Coming to you on a hot, sweaty, rainy day here at the University of Rijeka Library, where it is rainy and moist and everything else. Sorry, I'm running a little bit late. My wife just texted me 2 seconds ago telling me that a tree was knocked over by the storm yesterday in our yard. I swear to God, it seems like every time I go away, something happens. Last week, my well went out and I had to get that replaced remotely. And now today, the tree is fallen over. I swear to God, it's always something. Y'all ever have that kind of experience where there's always some sort of problem in life, always some sort of challenge? I don't even know what to tell you. At least I got my coffee or my tea, and I got my wonderful students. Good morning, Shame. Good morning, Nicole. Right, Marwa, it's always one damn thing or another. I swear to goodness. I hope y'all are doing well. Uh, Remember, it's exam week. I hope you found the exam review useful yesterday, and I hope you're prepared to do a good job on the exam. I'm kind of nervous. It's the first time we're doing the lockdown browser here, so I hope this isn't another set of problems for me. Yeah, right, right. It's almost like the world just keeps falling apart, Nicole. I don't know. Sometimes I just want to. The exam is due this Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Chame. Okay. Remember, you are not allowed to use your notes for this exam, and you must complete this exam when you start it. No stopping and starting the exam. If you would, if you haven't used the lockdown browser before, make sure you start the exam early enough so that if you have problems, I can help you with any problems you might have. Okay? Very good. So we have 4 people in the audience today, which is not a bad crowd. I'll bet you we get some more people here in a little bit. Let's go ahead and start. So we're talking about chapter 4. We're finishing up on physical development in infancy today. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about reflexes. Okay. Now, the physical development, actually, that's why that Ceplicata principle. Here's the deal. Let's talk about the physical development that occurs in human beings during the first year of their life. If you remember yesterday, I was talking about brain development, and I was suggesting to you that human beings' brains are not complete at birth. And you're going to do a ton of growing your nervous system's going to do a ton of growing during the first 2 years of your life. It's not going to finish until you're 25, but it's really going to do a great amount of growing during the first 2 years of your life. Remember, we're going to have the myelination and the dendritic arborization, and these neurological changes are going to cause you to be able to develop new behaviors and activities, right? So we talked about brain development on Tuesday. Today we're going to talk about the outward manifestations of this neurological development. So the idea is, here's the deal. So good morning, Victory. So when you see an infant, let me see, make sure, okay, yeah, okay. Now here's the deal. What should the healthy infant look like? All right. Now, here's the deal. When an infant is born, they have no conscious motor control over their body. They don't have the ability to think. They don't even really have the ability to eat. Human beings are born with almost no voluntary physical abilities. Instead, what you are going to be born with is a set of reflexes. These are infant reflexes. They are rudimentary reflexes that will disappear during the first year of life. And these reflexes provide that infant with some adaptive behaviors until their brain starts to mature enough to take care of to take care of these body parts voluntarily. So a reflex is an innate physiological response that's beyond your conscious control. If you've ever gone to the ophthalmologist and they blow that puff of air in your eye, you have a blinking reflex. Whenever you get something in your eye, it causes you to blink. That's a reflex behavior that is adaptive. If you ever have swallowed poison or stuck your finger down your throat, you have a gag reflex. That's just an innate response that your body has that helps to protect you. If you've ever gone to the doctor and they use that little rubber hammer and smack you on your knee and your knee kicks up, your foot kicks up, that's a reflex that is helpful in allowing you to stand up without thinking about it during the day. These are human reflexes that we have that help us to control our body without thinking about it. It's okay, Ryan, good to see you. We're just talking about infant reflexes. Now, the neat thing is, okay, that's cool, Rennie. Thanks for letting me know. Just come in and out as you can. Now, you should have learned this from, actually, no, I'm going to ask you. What part of your nervous system controls reflex behaviors? Does anybody know what part of your nervous system controls reflexes? Ryan, you were in this class, doggone it, my class. Marwa, you were in my class. Nicole, Ronique, you should be able to tell me what part of your nervous system controls reflex responses. Do I need to hum the theme to Jeopardy? And you turkeys better not have to Google this. Does anybody know? You forgot. It's okay. No problem. Reflexes are controlled by your spinal column. They're part of your somatic nervous system. Your reflexes are controlled by your spinal column. Remember, your brain controls your internal organs and it controls your voluntary movement, but your spinal column, that's okay, Marva, but your spinal column controls reflex behaviors. And the thing is, these behaviors are so simple, they are so stereotypic, and that we don't need to think about them, okay? So the blinking reflex, if something gets in your eye, you don't need to think about it, you just need to blink. Something goes down your throat, you don't need to think about it, you just gag. If you touch something hot, you don't need to say, that's hot, I wonder what I should do. Your reflex is going to be to pull your hand away. So reflexes are very quick, stereotypic behaviors controlled by our spine. Now, here's the thing. Since our brain is not able to control our body, humans are equipped with a set of infant reflexes. These reflexes provide adaptive behaviors for the child, and they will disappear over the first year as the brain begins to mature. Now, there are some instant examples of infant reflexes that I want you to know for this exam. All right, so human beings are born with two feeding reflexes. Since you don't know how to chew and swallow, and you don't know how to think about food, you have two feeding reflexes. The first is called the rooting reflex. When an infant feels something on its cheek, it will turn and start looking for something to suck. That's called the rooting reflex. Okay? Now, here's the thing, if you've ever put your finger in a baby's mouth or put a pacifier in an infant's mouth, as soon as you put something in that baby's mouth, they are going to start sucking it. So the rooting reflex and the sucking reflex are two feeding reflexes that allow that baby to take care of itself until it develops the ability to control its teeth in its throat and to swallow. These are two feeding reflexes. Another one that you have is a startle reflex. You'll notice right underneath me, this person's holding this baby. What you can do with the baby is if you hold them up and then just tilt their head down just a little bit like that, what you're going to see is that baby reaches out with its arms and legs like it's grabbing something, okay? That's called the Moro reflex. It's a startle reflex, and in my mind, I'm not sure, to me, I think it's got a survival reflex. Let's say a wild animal comes up on the mom and the baby, and the mom gets up and tries to grab the baby. It's important for that baby, if that baby's scared, to grab onto mom. So you can think of the Moro reflex as sort of one of those survival grasping type reflexes. Now, it's very important that you learn how to hold things. We have hands and feet, and it is very important that you learn how to grab things with your hands, right? To grab things with your hands. And so your body is equipped with a natural desire, tendency to grab things. So what you can do is you got a baby, you put something in their hand, and what you're going to notice is they're immediately going to grab it. All right? Now, the cool thing is, if you do the same thing across the bottom of a baby's foot, you're going to notice that those toes are going to curl around trying to grab it too. So we actually have a grasping reflex on our hands and on our feet. Now, these four reflexes I'm actually going to test you about. You need to be able to differentiate between the rooting, the sucking, the Moro, and the grasping reflex on this exam. I promise. It's a matching question. Now, these reflexes are there just to help you until you can do things on your own. Now, all of you I know can suck on something. You probably suck on a soda straw all the time, but you do it voluntarily and not as a reflex. You grab things, but you don't do it reflexively. You know when to close your hand and when not to close your hand. These reflexes should disappear. If your nervous system is developing properly, these reflexes should be present soon after birth, and they should disappear sometime in the first 6 to 7 months of life. Now, one of the reflexes that we're not talking about is this thing called the Babinski reflex. And if you stroke the side of a baby's foot, what you're going to notice is their little toes are going to stretch out into a weird sort of way. And that demonstrates that the baby's brain isn't in control of their foot. Now, EMTs, when they get on the site of an accident, one of the things they can do to test to see if you have spinal damage is they stroke the side of your foot. And if that Babinski reflex is there in an adult, it means that you have spinal damage because that reflex is hidden because your brain is controlling your foot. But if you have spinal damage and your spine is severed, that reflex will come back. And so what happens is as our brain begins to control our body, these automatic behaviors that we have become overwhelmed by voluntary behaviors, right? Does that make sense? Now let's talk about what these reflexes meant. As I suggested to you, all healthy infants are going to have these reflex behaviors right there at birth. If you don't have these reflexes, the doctor knows that you might have some sort of neurological problem as an infant. Now we're going to carry this idea out, and I'm going to talk about these things called milestones. Okay, now as children get older and their brains mature, remember I told you that myelination occurs in a very programmed fashion. And so as different parts of your brain myelinate, you should be able to control different parts of your body. And this fellow named Arnold Giselle was the first person to come up with this insight. And what he did was he looked at thousands of children and measured what the average child could do at different ages. And what that allows doctors to do now is to compare a developing child to these expectations to get a clue, a hint as to whether or not your child is developing normally, your child's nervous system is developing normally. All right? And so this provides an indirect evaluation of your neurological development, and it can serve as an early indicator of developmental problems. Now, there are formal assessments like the Ages and Stages Questionnaire and the Giselle Developmental Observation. These are tests and checklists that you can fill out as a parent. Okay, so you have formal assessments, but what most likely is going to happen is when you go into your pediatrician for your regular checkups, the pediatrician is going to ask you, hey, can your child do this? Can your child do this? Can your child do this? So either way, during the first couple of years of life, you're going to go to the pediatrician at 2 months, at 4 months, at 6 months, at 8 months, at 10 months, and 12 months. And your doctor is going to be asking you questions in an attempt to find out if your baby's developing milestone behaviors. We call them milestones. A milestone is sort of an accomplishment along a path to a final goal. And so a milestone behavior in developmental psychology is an ability that a nervous system should develop on the way to developing into a mature adult. I hope that makes sense. Now, I took my kids to Fuquay Pediatrics, and Fuquay Pediatrics actually uses the Ages and Stages questionnaire. And so they have a questionnaire for your 2-month-old child. Can your 2-month-old child do this and this and this and this? Can your 4-month-old child do this and this and this and this? Can your 6-month-old child do this and this and this and this? And what they do is they allow us to evaluate your child on a bunch of different dimensions of ability. Do you remember in the first week I talked to you about physical development, cognitive development, and socio-emotional development, those 3 concentric circles? Well, there are milestones for each one of those concentric circles. What sort of physical abilities should your child be doing at each age? What sort of mental abilities should your child have at 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, and 8 months? What kind of social behaviors should your child be doing at 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, and 8 months? And if your child is not hitting these milestones, not thriving, remember I mentioned the word failure to thrive, if your child is not thriving and hitting these milestones, it becomes an early indicator that something is wrong with your child's nervous system. Okay? Now, the social milestones might allow us to diagnose a child with autism. Cognitive milestones might allow us to develop, to discover whether or not a child has some sort of intellectual deficit. And your child, we might find that your child has some sort of motor delay, some sort of physical motor delay, right? If you think about it, when you go to school as a 5 and 6-year-old, you got to learn how to use a crayon and a pencil in order to write. And if you have a physical delay because of your neurological development, that physical delay is going to make it hard for you to do well in school. If you have a social delay, it's going to make it difficult for you to function socially as a normal human being. And so we're interested in how children develop across 5 broad categories of milestones. Okay? So your doctor's looking at growth, and they're going to look at the growth chart. Is your child getting tall and gaining weight at the appropriate rate? Now, we typically are trying to capture those people who represent the middle 90%. And your doctor's not going to worry as long as you're not in the bottom 10%. If you're below the bottom 10%, your doctor may or may not worry about your child. And so we have the growth milestones. Then we have physical milestones. We have both what we call gross motor milestones and gross motor milestones and fine motor milestones, okay? Gross motor milestones are what are presented in this chart right here. A gross motor behavior is any behavior that involves large muscles. What's a large muscle? Back control, being able to sit up straight. You have to control your trunk muscles. To be able to walk, you have to be able to control your big leg muscles. In order to hold a pencil, you also have to be able to use your small muscles too. And your small muscle, your fine motor behaviors are the things that are going to allow you to hold a pencil, to allow you to hold a scalpel if you become a surgeon, to allow you to hold a paintbrush if you decide to become an artist, right? Now, here's the deal. What you're noticing right here are the gross motor milestone expectations for a child during the first year. Now, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 behaviors. Actually, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This chart shows 10 behaviors. It only has the picture of 8, but whatever. And there are 10 characteristic large motor behaviors that your child should do during the first year. If you look at each of these red lines, the red line represents the earliest we typically see it, and the end of the red line represents the latest when the doctor wants to see that. So we're hoping that the child has the strength of their neck to hold their head up during the first month or so of life. We're hoping that your child, sometime between 2 or 4 months, has the ability to lift their chest, to have enough back and neck control to lift their chest up off the ground. We're hoping by sometime between 2 to 4 months that your child has the core muscles control to roll over, right? We're hoping sometime between 3 and 6 months that your child can sort of support, that if you hold your child up a little bit, they can at least put their feet on the ground and sort of balance themselves just a little bit. We're hoping sometime between 5 and 7 months that you can sit that child up and they'll have the trunk muscle control to sit up without support, right? And if your child is not hitting these milestones, then we may begin to suspect that something's wrong with their nervous system that controls these particular muscles. All right. Now, the deal is these general expectations, these red lines represent general expectations. And don't get too hung up if your baby is not rolling over and it's 5 months and 1 week. That's really not going to worry your doctor. What worries your doctor more is if your child stops hitting milestones or is way behind what they should do. Just like some of you folks come to class late and some of you come to class early, some children tend to be a little bit later with their milestones. But as long as you are progressing through these milestones and thriving through these milestones, as a general rule, your doctor is not going to get nervous. It's when that child doesn't hit any more milestones and just stops, or what you're going to see is some children, they'll hit milestones and then they'll actually start going backwards and losing milestone behaviors. That's what really worries your doctor. And when your doctor is evaluating your child's milestones, they're looking at when your child should have been born. So if your child is born, like let's say 3 weeks or 4 weeks early, you should add a month to all those milestone expectations. So they start the clock at 40 weeks when your child should have been born. Okay? Now, a couple of notes about learning how to walk. Learning to walk is that key ability that's going to help you survive. It's very necessary for life. And what you're going to notice is that most children are going to walk sometime between 11 and 14 months. The smaller your child is, the less weight they're carrying, so they may walk at the early end of that spectrum. If your child is a big, tall, beefy mofo, you might find that your child takes a little bit longer to start walking. And it all depends upon a lot of factors, okay? Now, what I want you to know is that the development of posture, it's going to include all of these things. It's a dynamic process. You're going to actually have to feel body parts as well as move body parts, right? And so your ability to judge where you are in space, your balance, your sense of balance, your sense of proprioception, your muscle stretching and back and forth, your sensory system is going to be just as important for your motor system. So don't think that these milestones occur just because your muscles work. They also work because your senses work too. So it's a dynamic process, okay? Now, as you can look around here, it says baby typically are going to be able to stand around 10 months, and they're even going to be able to maybe move their feet a little bit. But really, it's going to be like 12 to 13 months before your baby really starts cruising around on their own feet. And it's important, you're going to notice that when your child starts walking, they're going to need a very smooth spot to walk on. As adults, you folks can walk on cobblestones, you can walk up a hill, you can walk down a hill, you can walk on steps, you can walk on the side of a hill. your kid learning how to do that, they're going to have that smooth carpeted floor to practice their new motor skill, right? Now, and the neat thing is, some parents will actually practice different motor skills with their children, and you can actually, even though this is an innate process of maturation, depending upon what you focus on, sometimes you can actually affect whether or not a child hits a milestone earlier or later. Now, one thing of note, some children don't go through all of these milestones. The most common one is crawling. What you're going to find is some children just never hit the milestone of crawling. They'll just lay there scooting, and then one day they'll get up and start walking. So my oldest son learned how to crawl at 9 months, right? Um, my younger son never crawled. He just laid there, and I was like, dude, Zach, do something. And then all of a sudden he got up one day and started walking. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes the weird thing is sometimes a child will just skip right over a milestone. But as a general rule, these milestones allow us to have expectations. And it's just a cheap and quick way to monitor your child's neurological development. And if your child has a developmental delay, then what that allows the doctor to do is to get in there as quick as possible and provide some sort of help, some sort of support to help that child that's having a delay. They say the earlier you catch a child with autism, the better the outcomes, the therapeutic outcomes can be. And it's the same thing with all of these delays. The quicker you can catch that delay, and the quicker you can provide some sort of therapeutic intervention, the better that child's outcomes are going to be because of neuroplasticity, right? Now, let's talk a little bit about moving. Infant toys are very, very important because they allow our children to see things and to use their senses to sort of, as I suggested to you, this dynamic systems theory, learning how to move your body depends upon your sensory experience as well as your physical experience. So, children love rattles, right? And the thing is, when they shake the rattle, it makes a noise that turns the kid on, right? And so your child learns to move their arm based upon the arm movement and the sensory experience that occurs as a result of that movement. Your kid may have you may put something on your foot, and when your jingle bells on your kid's slippers, and when your kid shakes their foot, it goes shinga shinga, shinga shinga shinga, and it allows your kid to experience the sensory experience of moving their foot. So perceptual motor coupling suggests that not only is learning how to move your body a physical experience, but it's also a sensory experience. Do any of y'all remember those cool toys? I don't know if they have them now, but when I was a kid, they were those balls and it had the cutout shaped holes, and you had the star and you had the square and you had the circle and you had the triangle. And what you had to learn to do as a baby is to put the right shape into the hole to get it in that sort of circular globe. And then you pull the globe open and the toys fall out and then you put them back in. Do y'all know what I'm talking about? I hope I'm describing that all right. That in a sense, is an educational toy because it helps your child develop a sense of perceptual motor coupling. And as your child learns to do things, that actually opens up their world of experience. So before your baby can move and they lay on their back, they only see the world in one direction, up. But as soon as your baby learns to roll over, they can perceive down and up. So by learning to move, your child's world expands. And as your child's world expands, that causes them to engage in more complex movements. And so the process of this, of learning how to move your body, is this perceptual motor coupling. And another way of talking about it, your book talks about the dynamic systems theory. As your child learns to do their world expands, and as their sensory world expands, they learn to do new things. So it's sort of a dynamic system between your sensory experience and your motor experiences. Exactly, Shamay. It's called an educational toy for kids. You might look at it and say, what's educational about a circle? Well, it allows your child to learn shapes, and by learning shapes, they learn to move their hand. And then by learning to move their hand, their ability to perceive shapes becomes even more complex. So infant educational toys are just toys that create sensory experiences for children. And these sensory experiences allow the children to learn how to move in more complex ways in order to create new sensory experiences. Does that make sense? So, what's important for these sensory experiences? Well, it's not only your motor cortex, but you're also your midbrain, your brainstem, and your cerebellum. Your cerebellum and your brainstem are really, and your midbrain are really important for putting things together. People who have cerebellum damage or damage to their brainstem, if you've ever seen somebody walking that has trouble walking, I don't know if you've ever seen one of those people where they walk and their leg kicks out in a really weird way and they kind of look weird walking. They've probably got damage to that lower area of their brain, and this makes it difficult for them to integrate their different body parts. In order to walk, you have to integrate the movement of a bunch of different body parts. Not only do your feet have to move, your calves have to move, your thighs have to move, your gluteus maximus butt muscles have to move, your back muscles have to move, and they all have to move together. And your midbrain, brainstem, and cerebellum are the parts of your brain that integrate the movement of different body parts. Okay? An interesting demonstration of this perceptual motor coupling can be demonstrated by Gibson and Walk's visual cliff experiment. You know what, Shamay? Absolutely. They learn their shapes, colors, and using their brain. Absolutely. So the child's learning the shapes by moving their hands around. They learn different colors by pressing buttons that do different things. Absolutely, Shamay. Great point. You know, before I became a psychologist and taught developmental psychology and read books, I never understood why those toys were called educational. And the reason they're called educational is because, and make noise and do silly stuff like that, is because it's very important for sensory experiences to occur so that your child learns how to move these body parts in the correct fashion together correctly. Now, what you see below me is what's called the Gibson and Walk visual clip. So what they've got is a red and white checked tablecloth here, and you'll notice that this tablecloth, there's like a 4-foot platform, and then there's a drop off of about 3 feet of cliff, and then you see this checked white tablecloth on the bottom here. Now they've placed glass over this so that if the child goes off of this cliff, the child is not going to fall, right? But to an infant baby, when they crawl up to that edge, they're not going to understand the glass. And what you will find is that most children at first are, what you'll find at first is that children aren't afraid of that cliff. And you see this little baby right here, this baby, if that glass wasn't there, this baby would have tumbled and really hurt itself, right? So what you're going to see is that infants at first, they don't have the perceptual, right, okay, see that? This child doesn't seem to understand depth perception. If that glass wasn't there, this kid would hurt themselves. So you get the parent over here and they try to coach. Exactly. That's why the baby falls off the bed. That's a great point. That's a great point, Ronique. And it's because the child at first doesn't have the sense to understand the perceptual ability to see this difference in their environment. But as they start crawling, that crawling movement is going to allow them to sort of perceive when a kid crawls out, it's going to look down and it's going to notice this depth difference. And what you'll notice is that after a couple of weeks of doing this behavior, this kid is going to develop a fear of coming out on this edge. This little baby right here, after a couple of weeks, there's no way you're going to be able to coax this baby to actually come out onto that cliff. That child will develop a perceptual ability based upon their motor functioning. Now, the crazy thing about the visual cliff is, remember I said there's perceptual motor coupling? It turns out that once this child learns how to walk, this child is going to have to learn all over again how to interpret this visual cliff, right? And so, yeah, you're right, Ronique. So this child has learned the visual cliff, will learn the visual cliff crawling, but once this child starts walking, they're going to walk right over this cliff again, and they will have to relearn this perceptual evaluation using a new motor modality, okay? So it's kind of weird, and this shows you that every time the motor behavior it changes the way the kid perceives the world. The kid perceives the world differently and then changes the motor behavior again. And so the process of physical development involves both your ability to perceive your world, to hear it, to see it, to smell it, to touch it, and also learning how to control the different parts of your body. And so I want you to understand the dynamic system theory here. Okay? Now, let's talk about children's ability. One of their abilities is, it's considered a cognitive ability, but knowing what to look at and how to look at things is actually, that's a mental ability that you have to learn. You have to learn how to look at things. That's your first lesson in life. If I want to see something, I got to turn my head and look at it. And we actually have a part of our brain, the superior colliculus, that ties our senses together. I hear the snapping over here, my eyes know to turn this way. When I hear the snapping over here, I don't look this way because my ears have told my eyes where to turn. That's sort of this sensory coupling that we have. And so this is an intellectual ability. I mean, it's going to be there at the beginning. We're going to develop all kinds of complex logical abilities, but that's sort of the first example of cognitive development. And you can think of sensory perception as a physical process, right? Now, one of the things that we know is that infants very quickly in life have a preference for faces and face-like images. Now, the neat thing is that at first, children just are interested in the edges of faces, all right? So any one of these edge-looking images here, the child's going to prefer to look at as opposed to an image that doesn't have edges. But very quickly, this child's going to learn how to prefer the light bulb shaped face that has the eyes on top and the nose in the bottom. The triangle shape with the let's see, it's quickly going to prefer things that have two dark spots here and a dark spot lower here. That's how faces are shaped. So if you look at A, the child's probably going to learn how to prefer the right side up T before the downside, the upside down T. In D, the child's going to learn how to prefer the light bulb with the two black dots on top and the nose in the middle. If you look down at G, that child is going to prefer the face that has the eyes, the nose, and the mouth in the proper location. And so your child is going to quickly accommodate to looking at things that are face shaped and that have the spots in them that are similar to faces. And then as your child gets older, 2 to 3 months, they're not only going to need circular objects that have dark spots in them, but they're going to prefer the dark spots when they're in the correct place. And this occurs as your child's vision begins to mature, which happens pretty quickly during the first year of life. Now, one of the things that psychologists do in order to study what children know is to study what children like to look at. right? So in trying to study what a 4-month-old child knows, you can't ask them a question. They can't answer it, right? They don't have the ability to talk. But what you can do is you can look at what children are surprised at and make a guess about what they know. All right. So two ways that we test children's cognitive abilities is by looking at what they choose to look at. Children tend to look at things that they like, right? So in the visual, in the idea of identifying faces, what they'll do is they'll give children the picture in D. They'll give them the two faces, and what you'll find is that children will start to look at D, at the right side up face, more than they'll start to look at the wrong side up face. And this shows us that children know what a face is and prefer that face. So even though a kid can't tell you, yes, I know what a face looks like, your child, by what they choose to look at, will tell you what they know or don't know. Now it turns out children also develop mathematical ability pretty early in life, like 3 and 4 months of age. Your child is going to know more than and less than. It turns out that by about 4 months, children can tell the difference between groups of dots. And what they do is they do what's known as a visual dishabituation study. So you get, what they do is they'll flash up groups of dots. My kid actually did this at Duke University when he was 10 months of age. They'll flash up 2 groups of dots. And what you'll find is that if the groups of dots are the same, after a while, the child will get bored and they'll start looking at other things. But if you change one of those sets of dots, so let's say I'm showing 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, the child will get bored looking at that after a while. But then what you do is you change one of them to 2, 2, and what you'll do is the child will see the change and they'll look back. They're surprised because they're seeing something new. Just like when you see something new, you look at it more often. Infants will do the same thing. And it turns out that children can tell the difference in groups of number all the way up to comparisons of 12. But it has to be 2 to 1. They can tell the difference between 2 and 4. They can tell the difference between 3 and 6. And they can tell the difference between 6 and 12 dots. And that occurs pretty early within the first half of year. So we know that children have mathematical ability, and we've learned that by using what's known as a dishabituation study. Now, let me see, I'm not sure if we have that on the So there are other methods of gathering data on infants besides what they look at. And your book's going to talk about high amplitude sucking. Children, when they see something that they like, they'll start sucking their pacifier even faster. This is called high amplitude sucking, okay? And then we can also look at what children choose to grab and touch as a method of what they know and what they like. And then you can actually put electrodes on a baby's brain. And when human beings are surprised, their brains have a burst of electrical activity that's known as an event-related potential. If you were sitting in your bedroom right now and somebody you hadn't seen in 6 months walks in your bedroom door, your brain's going to be surprised and it's going to have a buzz of activity. That's called an event-related potential. So what we can do is we put those electrodes on a child's brain and then we show them things that change. And we can tell when the child notices the change because their brain will show a burst of electricity. And so these are all methods of understanding what children know early in life. So you can think of sensory perception, your ability to notice things, as sort of a physical process. Let's talk briefly about kids' visual acuity at first. It turns out that children are born pretty stinking nearsighted at first. Newborn's vision is probably 20/40, not very good. If you look at this picture of these faces down here, the face on the far left is probably what the kid sees at birth. And you'll see that at 1 year of age, the kid sees what's on the right. So if you look at the picture on the far left, see, this is why the child doesn't, when the child's born, they can't really see the face. All they can see is shadows and light spots. And so your child is going to prefer objects that have shadows and light spots that approximate a face. And the infant doesn't care if the eyes are in the wrong place. They're just looking at the edges and the dark spots in the middle. But over the first year of life, your child is going to, their vision is going to get better. They're going to start seeing details. And then they're going to start preferring to look at the face where the eyes and the nose and the mouth are in the right order. And so perceptual narrowing is the term that we talk about. The process of fine-tuning the visual characteristics among faces during the first year of life. So what your child's gonna first learn is they'll demonstrate with visual preference that they know when a face is right side up or upside down. Pretty quickly after that, they're going to be able to tell us when they see a familiar face as opposed to an unfamiliar face. And then towards 1 year of life, your child's actually going to start to notice the difference between people of different ethnicities, Indians versus Hispanics versus Caucasians versus African Americans. And so, in a sense, your child's going to really develop the ability to finely tune and notice differences in faces. It starts off pretty rudimentary and then it gets better over the course of a year. Right? Same perceptual narrowing appears to occur with speech preferences. Children prefer the mother's voice at birth, but then your children are going to learn the difference between a high-pitched voice and a low-pitched voice, a difference between a stranger and somebody they know, the difference between male voices and female voices. And so these sensory abilities are going to start to become more specific, and your kid's going to be better at detecting the differences in basic visual and acoustic sensory experiences very early in life. Real quickly, by about 4 to 8 weeks, your child's going to start to develop some color vision, and by 4 months, your children are going to have what we would call mature adult color vision. And remember, this all occurs because the child's occipital lobe has myelinated. Now, as it says down here, there is a critical period for vision. So in order for your child to develop their normal color vision, they actually have to experience colors during the first year of life. Now, I mean, you might say, well, that's ridiculous because everything's in color. This is true, but what you can see from animal models is that when you prevent animals from seeing different parts of their sensory world, these animals will actually grow up without the ability to see different visual features. And so we know that it's important for an organism to have color vision for V4, the color part in their occipital lobe, to develop normally. Okay? Now, fetuses demonstrate hearing at 33 weeks. They prefer their mom's voice even before they're born. And infants are not as good at hearing lower voices as adults. And in fact, I could show you this in our webinar next week. As you get older, infants hear higher pitched noise much better than older adults. And as you get older, your ability to hear higher pitched sounds is actually going to go away. It's quite a normal process that happens in our acoustic system. Newborns have the general ability to localize sounds. So what you can do is you can put a baby in a room and you can make a noise. And what you're going to find is that children is going to look in the correct general area. Now, your child, is going to take a while before your child actually knows that that object is making the sound. So your child's going to look over here, but it might not realize that it's a finger snapping that makes the sound. Your child might look at the water bottle and think the water bottle is making the sound. But they know where to kind of look, okay? And your child's hearing abilities is going to mature in the first 2 to 5 years when this auditory cortex and the temporal lobe finally myelinates. Newborns are sensitive to touch and pain, and it turns out that children probably takes them a couple of weeks to really smell the difference between their mom and other mom's milk and and breast milk from another parent. So your children are actually going to be able to tell the difference between mom and someone else with their smell. Now, your children do differentiate sweet, sour, and bitter, right? So if you put something sweet on a newborn's tongue, they're going to like it. If you put something salty on their tongue, they're going to like it. If you put something bitter on your kid's tongue, your infant's tongue, they're quickly going to tell you that they know that's a nasty taste. And your child's going to develop a preference for salty tastes by about 4 months. And you know, salt is very important to your survival. And so it makes sense that humans would be able to develop that sort of preference, right? Now, intermodal perception is the ability to integrate sensory information from 2 or more sensory modalities, right? And that is actually controlled by your corpus callosum. So my corpus callosum is going to allow me to move my hand out to pick my bottle up. What you're going to find is your infant at first is not going to be able to find things in their environment. They may see them, but they're not going to be able to direct their body to the appropriate place, okay? Now, as the superior colliculus myelinates deep in the part of the brain, your kid's going to be able to integrate your different senses so they can start moving their body using their eyes and their ears, okay? In the first 6 months, infants have difficulty connecting sensory input from different modes, but in the second half of the year, they're going to show an increased ability to make this connection mentally. And I like to talk specifically about vision and hearing. I'm going to be able to tell that it's during the second half of the first year, I'm going to be able to tell that it's those fingers snapping. I can see them moving and I can hear the sound. And your child's going to connect that visual input with the acoustic input. Now, very early at birth, your kid's going to look in the general direction of the sound, but they're not going to be able to say, hey, it's that thing that's moving that's making the sound until the second half of the first year. And again, I do want to mention to you that your cerebellum is very important for you being able to engage in complex motor behaviors. In order to walk, you need to move all kinds of different muscles, and those muscles learn to work together via the cerebellum. Okay. Children during the first 3 months are going to get pretty stinking clever. They're going to understand that objects cannot change size. And when you change the size of an object or show an impossible thing happening, your kids are going to be surprised, telling you that they know that objects can't change size and objects can't change shape. And if you'll look at this picture underneath me real quick, you see this ball, and you see how the ball rolls, and they're going to roll it behind this black curtain here. What you're going to see is that by 2 months of age, your child's going to follow that ball as it disappears. The first month, your child, when that ball rolls behind that curtain, the child's not going to follow its movement. But after 2 months, your child's going to expect that ball to come out the other side. Okay? All right. I am sorry I ran a little bit over today. I hope that makes sense. I'm sorry, Imani, I just got your message. I know your chat is not appearing in the chat bar. You probably aren't logged into YouTube today, Imani. You have to be logged in using your Gmail account in order for your chat to appear. Is that what it is? I know you're here, and I'm glad. I'm super sorry that you couldn't talk today. Make sure that you log in with your Gmail account before you come to the broadcast. I guarantee you that's probably what happened. If y'all don't have any questions, I'm going to go ahead and take off. Don't forget your discussion board today, your homework tomorrow, and your final exam this weekend. Take care and have a great weekend. Bye.